Here we go. Welcome to disaster preparedness class. This is our final class, number 6. I am Ann Forrest. You can reach me at seattleprepares@gmail.com, and I am delighted you are here. So we are going to talk about preparing with neighbors. You can do a lot with neighbors, and it's a lot of people are reluctant to turn to neighbors. We're much more comfortable turning to family, but in earthquake country, when you don't get any warning about disasters, you really need to be on good terms with your neighbors, and the more you know them, the better off you are. So we'll talk about why. I love this poster, comes out of LA. Being prepared for an emergency begins with hello. It really goes a long way. Just knowing who your neighbors are and being able to call them by name makes it much easier to be able to ask them for help and also give help. Neighbors are your support system for many disasters, especially the disasters that we are susceptible to here in the Seattle area. The big one being earthquakes. We don't get any warning. You don't get 3 days of warning for a hurricane or something like that coming. So they are surprise events, which means you just need to rely on whoever's around you at the time it happens to be your support system. So neighbors are your support system for many disasters, especially the disasters here we have here in Seattle. So learn to work with your neighbors. So for example, if there was a fire in the neighborhood, it's not going to be your sister-in-law that's 3 towns away, or I don't know, your best friend who's 17 miles away. They aren't the ones that are going to put a blanket around your shoulders in the middle of the night while the firefighters are working on your home. It's going to be your neighbors. That's the kind of help that we're talking about here. A downed power line, if you're trapped in a car, it's going to be the neighbors that are going to help. It's the neighbors that are going to flag down the fire truck as they come to help out. And then obviously in an earthquake, it is definitely all about neighbors, and whoever happens to be around you at the time. They are your greatest resource. So the American rugged individualism, this idea is really a myth, and it's a toxic myth. It causes so many problems for our society. We would be better off if we were kinder and more open and more willing to rely on one another. But we have this idea that we can go it alone, and isn't really how it works. Anyway, so we are the help. You are the help until help arrives. And why is that? Well, there's about 800,000 people that live in Seattle, plus tourists. So we're close to 1 million in the summer when we've got a lot of tourists around. We only have so many first responders on duty. There's about 200 firefighters and ambulance personnel on duty at any one time, day or night, weekends, holidays, whatever. It doesn't vary too much from 200, because that's what city folks have figured out. We need to maintain the status quo, to take care of things on a daily basis. We obviously do not staff the city with firefighters and ambulance personnel to handle a large disaster. We staff according to what we need on a day-to-day basis. So those 200 responders are not going to automatically multiply or quadruple themselves if there's something big happens in Seattle. And keep in mind that very few of them live in Seattle. So even the ones that are off duty that want to come into the city and help, it's going to be very difficult. If it's a big earthquake, it's going to be very difficult for them to physically get to work. So we are, I don't want to say stuck, but we need to depend on our neighbors helping neighbors. That is how we're going to survive those first couple days after an earthquake, because our first responders will be spread so thin, and they will go to the areas that are hardest hit. That is not my community. My community is mostly single family homes. We have some apartments, but they're not huge. Mostly single family homes. We are so low on their priority list. It's going to be places like Pioneer Square, where buildings are not going to do as well after a lot of shaking. It's going to be downtown Seattle, where a lot of the high rises are, where there's a huge, just a very dense population. So The outer areas are not going to get as much attention because honestly, most of us won't need as much. Some of the lower socioeconomic areas are going to need a lot of care. Like I said, Pioneer Square, and then the really dense areas of the city will get most of the attention. Okay, here's the preparedness pyramid. I really like this because I think it's very visual, and it's a good reminder to folks where what they need after a disaster is supposed to come from. The bottom of the pyramid is the biggest, and it is you and your family, or you and your household. It is where water and food is supposed to come from in the event of a large disaster. They ask you to store 2 weeks of water and 2 weeks of food, if at all possible, more if you can do it. Medications. You're not going to be able to get medications after a big disaster. And we've talked about, the twin bucket toilet idea. If your toilet doesn't work at home, they're not going to set up porta potties everywhere. It's just going to be too hard to get them and put them in place. So you're going to have to figure out how to take care of that stuff yourself in your own household. Stuff you can do with your neighbors is honestly looking out for one another and combining your brains. You're just going to come up with much better decisions if you have more people trying to figure out what to do. Coordinating cooking. I think this is going to be super important if we have a big power outage or a disaster like an earthquake. Cooking is going to be very difficult. Everybody's going to want a hot meal, and not everybody's going to be able to make a hot meal. How many of us have barbecue grills, or I don't know, there's all kinds of camping stoves and that kind of stuff. We might have one, but how long is it going to last? How much power do we have? And wouldn't it be smarter to ask one household to cook for the night and make meals for, 6 for their household and 6 other households at the same time, and then share that responsibility? Much smarter, better use of everyone's time and their limited propane or whatever. Much better use of all your resources if you coordinate cooking, and then just sharing resources, whatever those might be. So neighbors can, just some ideas to throw out there. You can coordinate big purchases of water, have it delivered by a big truck. Or if you have the ability to fill those 55-gallon drums, maybe you could go in and do that together. Learn how to turn off gas, learn how to turn off water to different households. Don't ever turn off someone's gas unless they really need it turned off, but you can absolutely turn off their water because they can turn it back on once they're back home. Combine your resources and combine your brains. Again, not everybody knows everything. You can also check on those needing extra care in your neighborhood, whether it's the elderly, folks that are injured, children, those with access and functional needs. Just spread out some of the caretaking. You can have somebody in your area, it's the doctor or the nurse or whoever on your block who has decided that, has raised their hand and said, yeah, I'll be the first aid station. And maybe they stock up on extra bandages and gauze and that kind of stuff for any kind of injuries. And like I said, making meals together, I think, is just genius. I think it's such a good use of resources. It's a good community building kind of exercise. It just makes so much sense. It's going to happen. Frankly, I don't know how to do it. I've never cooked a lot of food on a barbecue grill other than like barbecue chicken or something like that. But I'm anxious to make a huge pot of soup on a barbecue grill. I know it can be done. I've just never actually tried it. So I'm trying to figure out a way to test that. And then you can also, instead of all of you listening to the radio on KIRO 710 a.m., instead of all of you sitting around listening to that, just designate one person. You do it for the next 2 hours and take down everything you hear that sounds important and share it with the neighborhood. And then we'll ask someone else to do it. But you don't all need to be doing that. Not everybody needs to be sitting next to a radio listening for everything. So just share jobs like that. And then cleaning up together. A lot of sweeping. It's going to be a lot of picking up, bricks and that kind of stuff that have fallen. Just sweeping up inside houses, all that kind of care you can do together certainly makes it go faster. So keep in mind, everybody in your neighborhood, every neighbor around you has a skill. They may not think they're skilled, but they have skills. They can clean, they can cook, they can watch pets, they can take care of kids, whatever. They might be plumbers, they may be have just amazing skills, or maybe just the basics of life. Everyone is going to be needed. So we've talked about you and your household and what you should be prepared to do, you and your immediate neighbors. The next thing we're going to do is talk about emergency communication hubs. And I've mentioned these off and on through these classes. And this really is it's just a sweet setup. I really enjoy the emergency communication hubs. I'm very involved with them, and I just truly believe in their existence and how much good they can do. So we're going to talk about that. Okay, so we are social creatures. As much as we try not to pretend, we try to pretend we're not, we are social creatures. If there is a big disaster, like an earthquake especially, we will naturally gather outside, because being inside with that idea that stuff is going to fall on you from the walls or the ceiling or whatever, it will feel much safer to be outside than to be inside. So we will naturally gather in open spaces and do what we can to help one another. Everybody thinks it won't happen, but research shows it has. If anybody's interested, I know of a fabulous book where you can read about that. She studied disasters all over the world, including the US. And it's just amazing what people do in times of disaster. It really does bring out the best of us, not the worst of us. There will be some folks that don't act well, but by and far, disasters bring out the best in people, not the worst in people. So again, we're going to gather naturally in open spaces. So places like parks or pea patches or parking lots. We're going to gather naturally wherever the community would just naturally get together. The emergency communication hubs have taken advantage of that. A, natural gathering tendency we have, and B, most communities have some kind of open space where people would just naturally gather. Emergency communication hubs take advantage of the fact that we gather together in open spaces, and most communities have some kind of open space, whether it's a pea patch or a parking lot of a church or a park or whatever. So this is a map of the emergency communication hubs. Some of them are if they look like the one below, and you don't have to pay close attention to this, but some of them are places where neighbors are organized. They've gotten together, they've said, okay, we know we're going to need to do this. Let's get ahead of it and let's get organized now. So some of the spots in the city have neighbors that are organized, and some have not gotten organized yet. The ones that are organized, have built a team of folks that are kind of dedicated to this, and they have gotten gear. And the gear usually comes in a box like this. It's called a job box. Most of them will fit in the back of a pickup truck, just to give you some idea of the size. They're very, very nondescript. If you start looking for them, you will see them all over Seattle, but it's hard to tell whether it's an emergency communication hub, or is it a parks department box that has rakes or sports equipment, bats and balls and that kind of stuff in it. So they're very, very nondescript, and that's on purpose. If you were to open one up, this is what it would have in it. It is not food and water. It is supplies to help us organize the community and support one another. So there's tables, there's canopies in there, there's signs, there's lots of paperwork. It's very, very low tech. This is all paper and pencil kind of stuff. The hub has 4 missions. The first one is to gather and share information. The second one is to match haves and needs, folks in the community that have a need and those that can fulfill that need. So we gather and share information. We get information from neighbors, just folks walking by saying, hey, there's a downed power line in the post office. Just thought somebody should know about it. And the hub volunteers are standing around under a canopy. Most of them are going to be wearing orange vests. We look like we know what we're doing. So people are going to walk up just naturally and go, hey, thought you should know about this. And we take that information down and we post it so that our community knows about it. Hey, there's a downed power line in the post office. Stay away from that area. We also might be able to send volunteers to the post office, and maybe they can move some cars or do something to make that safer so that nobody accidentally stumbles across this potentially live downed power line and gets electrocuted. So there's lots of things we can do. But anyway, we get information from neighbors just walking by. We send volunteers out to go find out what's going on, local stores, local schools, nursing homes, whatever. We can send folks out. We send them out to a bridge. Hey, tell us if the overpass is still standing. Tell us if the bridge is up or down, that kind of stuff. So we can send folks out on reconnaissance missions. We also greatly use ham radio operators to talk to one another, to talk to the city, just to get information. So whatever information we can get in coming in through the radio, we will also post that for the community. And then the police and fire folks all know that we exist. They may stop by and go, hey, just wanted to let you guys know, we know about the fire down at the gas station. We've driven by there. We're just going to let it burn out. And so we can put that up on our whiteboards to the community. Hey, fire department knows about the fire. They said there's nothing to worry about. They can't put it out right now. They don't have the time or gear or whatever, but they're just going to let it burn. And I'm making that up. That maybe that will never happen. I don't know. But we get information and we post it so that people know what's going on. That's just one of our ham radio operators doing his thing. We also match haves and needs. And these are just pictures of a couple different systems we have for organizing. They're pocket organizers. So if a family has a tarp, a household has a tarp, and there's a household that needs a tarp, we match those two households up. We say, hey, Betty Sue, John Thomas over there has a tarp and he's willing to share it. You guys make the swap. If somebody needs diapers and some family has diapers they're willing to give away, we match those two up. Again, not at the hub necessarily. We want all of these matches to happen out in the community. We don't want anybody bringing diapers to the hub and just dropping them off. Somebody that lost a puppy and somebody that found a puppy, we help these two households hook up so that they can get the puppy to the right place. And then somebody that has a broken window and needs it patched or whatever, we'll find an able-bodied neighbor that can help them with that and put some plastic up or cardboard or whatever. So we are matching haves and needs within the community. We are helping our neighbors help ourselves. So not relying on the police or ambulance or anybody else because we know they're going to be tied up. We're trying to do what we can do for ourselves. We also coordinate volunteers. Basically, we send them out to do different missions based on what's going on in the community. Again, everybody has skills. Some people can translate, some people have medical skills, some people have building skills. There's arborists out there. There's, somebody can provide childcare, pet care, yada, yada, yada. Everybody has something to contribute. So we have an information area, like I said, where we post all the information we can find that's good information for the community to have. We match haves and needs. We coordinate volunteers because we know people are going to want to help. We want to help them. We want to give them jobs to do that are really smart to do, use their skills, keep everybody safe, and just be very efficient. We don't want people running around not helping. So coordinating volunteers is one of the jobs we do. The last thing we do is we have an education area. What we've tried to do is go through Google, frankly, and not necessarily Google, more reliable websites than that, but we've tried to download information that we think will be helpful after a large disaster and print it up so that we have it when we need it. Because after a large disaster, communications are down, the internet's down, you're not going to be able to Google anything. So we've tried to print stuff out. We have posters that we've printed covering some of the super basic stuff. And then we have, this is I'm not sure what this is, taking care of something, but this is in Amharic. So we have stuff that's translated into different languages just to help out folks where English is not their primary language. And then things like how to handle a down power line. If the fire department absolutely can't be there, there is a way to get the person like out of a car or something like that if there's a power line on their car. It's kind of last resort, but again, if the fire department can't get there and that person has to get out, we have documented how to make that happen safely. So like I said, just trying to think of what we're going to need before we need it and get it printed out and put in the hub box. So again, this is what we do. We gather and share information. We match haves and needs. We organize the volunteers that come up to help, and we educate. Next steps for you guys, this is like homework. Mark June 11th on your calendar. It is a big deal for us in the Emergency Communication Hub world. Once a year, every summer, we activate, and this year we have 11 different hubs throughout the city activating on the same day. So June 11th is a big day for us. I will send out more information. I'm currently working on the flyer and making sure it's really very accurate. There's lots of moving pieces with this project. But like I said, there's 11 different hubs, excuse me, that are activating on June 11th, which is a Sunday. The drill is going to start at 1:30 in the afternoon and it'll be done by 4. So once I send this out, you want to find the hub that is closest to your home or work or whatever. And make sure you visit that hub so that you can A, see how one runs. B, you will learn so much about how to prepare for a power outage. That's the scenario we're doing this year, is a long-term power outage. So mark June 11th on your calendar. Let's see, work on your to-do list. This is all great information. What we've gone over in these 6 classes, it's great information to know, but if you don't do this stuff on your homework list, you will regret it. Request training. You can ask the Office of Emergency Management, and that's on your homework list. You can ask them to come and talk to a group. Somebody like me will show up and talk face to face, or we can do it over Zoom too. Talk to a group and present a lot of the same information that I've presented during this class. And then last thing is keep learning. This is not something that sinks in the first time you hear it. You really need to hear it more than once. So keep attending classes or whatever it is you do to keep up to date, but definitely keep learning. As always, I'm happy to answer questions. There's my email address. Please feel free to email me with any questions you might have, and I will give it a shot at answering them. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if anybody has any questions. I'm not seeing anything in the chat. If anybody joined late and you didn't see this, there is a person on the call, Pam O'Connor, who is trying to start a hub in the south end of Ravenna Park. She would love to hear from anybody if they are interested in joining her. Yeah, you're all welcome. I enjoy teaching, and I will probably do this again. So as long as you've signed up for the Seattle Prepares newsletter, you will hear about it in the future. You will also get probably several emails from me about this June 11th drill, because it's a big deal. We only do this once a year. You really need to try and make it to the drill on June 11th if you can at all. Because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for us. We're really putting ourselves out there and hoping that the community responds. So the more people that come out, the more energized we get, and the more energy we have going forward. Sometimes, yeah, I'm with the Magnolia Hub. So the more folks get involved, the more energy we have to keep going with this. Otherwise, it's kind of lonely teaching disaster preparedness sometimes. So June 11th. I'm gonna stop talking. Any last minute thoughts? Okay.
Yes, there is one thing
Yeah, go ahead.
that came up. If you would like to have a SNAP presentation, for instance, if you live in an apartment building, someone who lives there can call and request a SNAP presentation, and then then a room can be arranged in the building. And that has been suggested as being perhaps an easier route to actually accomplish that than trying to talk the management of your building into doing something.
Yep. And that information is at the bottom of your homework list. Consider organizing training by contacting the Office of Emergency Management. Thanks, Jody.
Yes.
Sandra, you had your hand up.
Yes, I was wondering, is there a place to find information for people who are older and live by themselves, or maybe have disabilities that might have special situations?
I don't know of any class. Sandra, do you mind giving me your last name?
Layman, L-A-Y.
Okay. Okay. I can find some information and pass it on to you. Honestly, it's not that much different than the general preparedness information. Some things to think about are a lot of folks that have access and functional needs need communication devices to help them communicate. And those are all battery powered, which is a big problem in a long-term disaster. So it's things like having backup batteries, or knowing someone with a generator and kind of talking to them ahead of time, going, hey, this is really important for me. Can you make sure that I have space on your generator? That kind of stuff. So I will send out what I can. I don't have jobs.
What do you mean by communication devices? Just make sure I.
Yeah, so like some people that are hard of hearing, they need devices, or they're unable to speak, so they're typing on iPads and that kind of stuff. I'm not super familiar with this kind of device, but I know there's devices out there. There's like talk to text, where somebody can let me think of how this works. I don't know. I'm blanking. But there's devices that folks use to communicate. There's also medical devices that are going to need batteries, and that's a big deal. That's a big problem. Whether it's a sleep apnea machine or an oxygen concentrator or something like that, keeping those powered is really difficult. I want to encourage you, if you have specific questions, email me. I don't have a lot off the top of my head to help with this. Justine?
Yeah, thank you very much for the series. This has been really great. I had a quick question about the hubs on June 11th. So you guys will have things set up, and then are we expected to come and stay from like 1:30 to 4, or do we just kind of swing through like we would in a disaster? Can you describe what actually is going to happen?
Great question. Yeah. So what we hope people will do will come anytime between 1:30 and 4. The closer to 1:30 you show up, the better off, because we get a little tired the closer and closer to 4 o'clock. And if you're showing up at 3:45, we're not going to have much energy. So the closer to 1:30 you can show up, the better. What we will do is hand you a piece of paper and ask you to read that piece of paper out loud to a hub volunteer we'll call the greeter. And basically it'll say something like, my wife's in labor, the phones aren't working. We've tried to call her obstetrician, but like I said, the phones aren't working. we're really worried about, or we can't drive to the hospital because the roads are not passable or whatever. Can you help us? So that's a scenario you would present to the hub with, and the hub would go, oh, yeah, come over here to the volunteer tent and we'll see if we can't find you somebody that has experience with delivering babies. So that's what we ask the public to do, is show up and we will give you the piece of paper to read, and then we will navigate you. We will help you hopefully get your needs met by working your way through the hub system. So that, excuse me, it gives us practice on meeting your needs, and it gives you really good information about situations you may be faced with and how the hub can help. So both of us learn, the people working in the hub and the people just showing up to the hub, to be what we call citizen actors. So you don't have to be there the whole time, but it will be really, really interesting. I guarantee it. I've never met someone that attended a hub exercise that didn't walk away going, wow, I learned so much. So I would definitely make a point of coming to the drills, whatever location works for you. And again, I'll send that out as soon as we've got it a little bit better finalized.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. Yeah. Okay. And I can't remember, I didn't write it down. Who had the question about GMRS radio? Is that person? Oh, Pamela Davies. Okay, I see you now. I wrote down GMRS, but not your name. Okay, again, email me if you have any questions specific to you. If you have any, forget something going forward, trying to get your homework done, I'm here. Okay. Have a good rest of your week.